Welcome to our series, and today we have managed to reach double digits. We are at passage 10. My name is Vikrant. I'm your personal coach for all things related to English and communication skills, even the mental aspects of preparation. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so that you are the first one to know whenever I go ahead and upload any video. So let's go ahead and dive into our passage. So as usual, you are going to read the passage and attempt it at your pace by pausing the video. Once you have gone through the passage and the questions, I will come right back in where we'll go ahead, read the entire passage together and then solve the questions. So starting with the first slide for you. So what do you think? Go ahead, pause the video right here, answer the question, read the passage, and once you're done, then we'd come back and move on. Go ahead, take a shot. Pause. Next. Next. So I hope you're pausing and reading. Next. Next. And last. So this is the last paragraph. Pause, read. Okay, so now let's dive into the questions, starting with question number 1. So please pause, answer it. So I hope you've answered it. Let's move on to question number 2. So I am done. So here is question number 3 for you. And with that, let's get into question number 4. So that essentially takes care of the entire passage for you. Let's go ahead and now work on it together, including the questions, starting with the passage. So when we teach engineering problems now, we ask students to come to a single best solution defined by technical ideals like low cost, speed to build and ability to scale. So what does this sentence tell us? There are students who are learning engineering. We tell them that, hey, whenever you come across an engineering problem, you are supposed to arrive at the best solution. But how do you determine best? This particular sentence tells us that the best is determined by technical ideals. So how low a cost is, how quickly can you build it, can you really scale it, can you create 100,000 of these pieces in a short span of time at a minimal cost. Those are the kind of things that we teach them to think over. Now this way of teaching primes students to believe that their decision making is purely objective. Now what do you understand by the word prime? Prime as a verb is to tell someone something that will prepare them for a particular situation. So because we tell them that, hey, you just supposed to be driven by these technical ideals, it leads them or it prepares them to think that in reality they are making decisions that are purely objective. Why objective? Cost is objective, time taken to produce is objective, scalability is objective. And as it is grounded in math and science. So once again, things which are all objective. This is known as technical social dualism. The idea that the technical and social dimensions of engineering problems are readily separable and remain distinct throughout the problem definition and solution process. So basically, see, dualism essentially at its core is an idea that things are made up of two contrasting parts, or that things can be divided into two parts. So for example, we have this religious dualism. The world is made up of two contradictory forces, the forces of good and the forces of evil. And even in your daily life, you notice you have black and white, you have a day and a night. So that's dualism. So in this case, the author has been kind enough to define it for us as well. So technical social dualism says that, hey, whenever you look at a problem, right, then this problem has a technical side and a social side. Both of these sides are completely separate and distinct from each other. And similarly, the solutions that you arrive at will also be different. So there can be a technical solution and there can be a social solution, and they're all completely separate and distinct from each other. Moving on. Non-technical. So the previous was all about technical. Now we're saying non-technical parameters such as access to a technology. Hey, remember pandemic? The classes shifted online. So there were people whose children had access to a smartphone and internet. They could still continue to study. But then people who were poor, who did not have a smartphone, did not have all those data packs and internet, they could not study. So they did not have access to that technology. So technology is one thing, internet, smartphone is one thing, whether you have access to it or not is different. Then you can have non-technical parameters such as cultural relevancy, how relevant it is for your culture. So technology, how relevant it is for your culture. See, I don't know about you, I come from a small town, middle class upbringing where, you know, AC was considered a luxury, and even today, although I can easily afford to run an AC non-stop, even today if I'm sitting alone and I turn on the AC, I feel guilty. So I'd rather not. So anyway, access to a technology, cultural, so that shift, that difference, that's a non-technical thing. Or potential harms. Technology can also harm. We know that. Remember that blue whale game from a couple of seasons ago, some 3-4 years ago, the people were committing suicide. So we're saying that access, culture, potential harms, they are deemed political parameters. They're not technical parameters and invalid in this way of learning. So in the previous paragraph, engineers are trained to focus on only the technical aspects. These other aspects, they like ignore these. But the author says, but those technical ideals are at their core social and political choices determined by a dominant culture focused on economic growth for the most privileged segments of society. So he's saying that even those technical ideals, low cost, scalability, etc., they are at their core social and political choices. There is, at the end of the day, somebody in a society, imagine China turned to pivot towards this industrialization model where there was a relentless focus on margins, relentless focus on cost, relentless focus on scalability. But then it was a social choice. They thought that social and political choice. They thought that this is their country's way out of their existing situation and towards betterment. They're saying, but the author says that these choices, these social and political choices, are being determined by a dominant culture. So within a society, there are some entities which are going to be dominant. So these dominant cultures are focused on economic growth for the most privileged segments of society. So they are basically worried more about the rich, the haves, and not the poor and the have-nots. By choosing to downplay public welfare as a critical parameter for engineering design, we risk creating a culture of disengagement from societal concerns amongst engineers that is antithetical to the ethical code of engineering. So let's read it. So far we are saying that so far the author has built a case that, hey, you may focus on technology, you may say that these other things are social or political, but the truth is even that focus on technology is being driven by social and political choices. And the goal of those choices is to produce economic growth for those who are already rich. And then the author says that, hey, so in such a scenario, when we do not cater to the needs of the poor, when we do not think public welfare is a critical part of engineering design, we risk creating a culture of disengagement from society. So engineers will no longer feel that they are connected to societal concerns. And that idea is antithetical, is opposite. That idea is opposite to the ethical code of engineering. So the author builds a case that so far the way engineers are being taught to separate technology from all the other concerns is not right. They are supposed to focus on the public good, public welfare. It is their moral duty. Then next, in my field of medical devices, ignoring social dimensions has real consequences. Most FDA approved drugs, FDA is one of those US agencies which determines whether a drug can be sold legally in the US market or not. So most FDA approved drugs are incorrectly dosed for people assigned female at birth. Oh, so you notice, so today if I were to take say paracetamol, then I know that I am supposed to take a 650 milligram dose, right? So this is the dose size for me. Now the truth is, paracetamol is basically dependent on your weight. When you give it to children, you look at their weight and then calculate the dose. But then if you say that, hey, adult dose is 650 milligrams, but then you realize in a society, there can be a male adult and there can be a female adult. And female adults are usually, in terms of weight, lower on that scale. And therefore, this dose of 650 milligrams may not be right for them. They probably required a lower dose or a higher dose depending upon the relation of the dose with the weight, right? Or some other factors that, some other biological factors that separate a biological male from a biological female. So saying in medicine, they haven't even bothered about checking the correct dose for females. They're just looking at males. And it leads to unexpected adverse reactions. This is because they've been inadequately represented in clinical trials. And then next paragraph says, beyond physical failings, subjective beliefs treated as facts by those in decision-making roles can encode social inequities. Inequity is something which is unfair. So in your society, you have certain things which are unfair. Now, there are some people who are in decision-making roles. They have some subjective beliefs. A subjective belief is an opinion that may not have any basis in reality. Now, for example, I may feel that rock and roll music has a healing effect on people. I believe this. It's a subjective belief. I listen to rock and roll, I am rejuvenated. Now, you could be somebody who says that, hey, it is the classical music that has that rejuvenating effect. Separate, right? Now, whichever one of the two of us is in a decision-making role, we'll be in a way pushing our belief forward. If you come into power, you will promote classical music. If I come into power, I'll promote rock and roll. So similarly, in society too, you may have some biases. For example, racism, right? So if you have a subjective belief and you are in a decision-making role, then you can end up codifying those inequities. You can design the system in such a way that that unfairness becomes a part of the system. For example, now moving back to the passage, for example, spirometers, routinely used devices that measure lung capacity, still have correction factors that automatically assume smaller lung capacity in Black and Asian individuals. Hey, so are my lungs less powerful than a Caucasian male, a white male? There are some people in the medical fraternity who at some point of time definitely thought so. Okay, next. These racially based adjustments are derived from research done by eugenicists who thought these racial differences were biologically determined and who considered non-white people as inferior. So eugenics is a branch of genetics that studies how we can make a particular species better. So as a science, it is pretty neutral, but then during the era of around World War II, this got applied to human beings. Remember Hitler's persecution of Jews? Nazi Germany killed millions of Jews by saying that Jews are inferior, Aryans are superior. And it was not limited to just the Jews. They said that people who are disabled are inferior, people who are mentally challenged are inferior. So they should not be allowed to produce children. So this eugenicist is basically those kind of scientists who think some races are superior as compared to some other. So they are the ones who created these machines, so their biases are reflected in the way we look at the readings of these particular machines. Now these machines ignore the influence of social and environmental factors on lung capacity. There can be this, right? Now imagine, let us say that I am one half of a twin. So there were two twin children who were born. One of those twin children was shifted to Norway post birth. The other one was living here in Delhi NCR like me. Now the problem in Delhi NCR is that we have tons of pollution, and that pollution over a long period of time can adversely affect our lungs. So both of these guys will have different lung capacities, but the difference is because of the environmental factor. It is not because of the fact that the genes are limited. So similarly, you see a lot of Caucasians live in those nations where pollution levels are low, where the population levels are low, and therefore it's not genes which is making them better, but that social and environmental factor. Maybe they are consuming more protein. So such things, those are the kind of things that we are talking about here. Okay, then next, many technologies for systematically marginalized people. So marginalized people are people who are pushed to the sides of a society. They are not paid attention to. They are poor. They are underrepresented in policy making. Those kind of individuals. So many technologies for such people have not been built because they were not deemed important. Such as better early diagnostics and treatment for diseases like endometriosis, a disease that afflicts 10% of people with uteruses. So basically, endometriosis is a disease that affects 10% of the women, but we do not have better early diagnostic and treatment for them because women are not considered worth it. They are marginalized, the patriarchal society. And we hardly question whether devices are built sustainably, which has led to a crisis of medical waste and healthcare, accounting for 10% of US greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, social justice must be made core to the way engineers are trained. So once again, the throwback to the second paragraph, right? This is the point that he built there. He's just gone on to offer elaborations and some more points, and now we are coming back to social justice, that public welfare must be made core to the way engineers are trained. Now some universities are working on this. Engineers taught this way will be prepared to think critically about what problems we choose to solve, how we do so responsibly, and how we build teams that challenge our ways of thinking, or in other words, that help us overcome the biases that exist in the world around us. So here, individual engineering professors are also working to embed societal needs in their pedagogy. Pedagogy is the method or style of teaching. Okay, so pedagogy is basically the method or style of teaching. So so there are some teachers who have integrated societal needs into their approach itself. So here is one example: Darshan Karwad, activist engineering to challenge engineers to acknowledge their full moral and societal responsibility to practical self-reflection. Khalid Kadir at the University of California, Berkeley, created a popular course that teaches engineers how to engage in place-based knowledge, an understanding of the people, context and history to design better technical approaches in collaboration with communities. So it's just an extension of the previous paragraph. When we design and build with equity and justice in mind, we craft better solutions that respond to the complexities of entrenched systemic problems. Entrenched problems are problems that are very deep rooted in the society. They have become so, they have been there for so long that they've kind of become fixed. It's difficult to change them. And systemic problem is a very basic problem that is experienced by an entire group, an entire social segment or an entire country, and it is not something that affects only particular parts of it. So that's a passage. Let's dive into the questions. So in this passage, the author is making the claim that, so let's start. So this seems to be a main idea question, but once we dive into the answer choices, we'll be able to see this, check this. Okay, A, technical social dualism has emerged as a technique for engineering students to incorporate social considerations into the technical problem solving process? No, this has emerged and it keeps the social and political aspects outside of the scope of problem definition and solution. So A actually goes on to contradict it. This technique has emerged, and in this technique engineering students stop thinking of social considerations. So this contradicts the passage, can very easily be ruled out. B, the objective of best solutions in engineering has shifted the focus of pedagogy from humanism and social obligation to technological perfection. I think this, I'm willing to bet that a lot of people will look at it and they'd say that, oh yes, this is right. But then it all boils down to vocabulary. Do you know the meaning of the word humanism? We are shifting the focus on taking care of the societal needs, societal problems. So humanism looks like a word that would convey that meaning, but that's not at all the case. Humanism is a belief system which is based on a singular principle. What is that principle? A person's spiritual and emotional needs can be satisfied without following God or religion. So it says that existence of God, presence of a religion is not necessary for your spiritual needs, for your emotional needs. You can satisfy those even without God and religion. So that's the core of humanism. Now, have we talked about any such thing in the entire passage? We haven't. So that itself takes it out of scope and thus can be ruled out. See, engineering students today are trained to be non-subjective in their reasoning, as this best enables them to develop much needed universal solutions. So the author is making the claim that yes, they are trained to be non-subjective, but then the latter part, it says as this best enables them to develop much needed universal solutions. This is not right. The main claim of the author is that because they are trained to be non-subjective, that is objective, they are creating solutions which are not in sync with the public welfare. They are creating solutions which are contributing to the economic growth of the privileged. So it's the second half which is wrong. So let's rule out C. D, engineering students today are taught to focus on objective technical outcomes. Yes. Independent of the social dimension of their work. Yes. So they say ignore social dimension, ignore political dimension, ignore public welfare. Just look at technical ideals, cost, scalability, speed. So this definitely is right. Although I want the tone to be a little more negative towards their preference for technical outcomes, but considering that A, B and C are definitely wrong, D emerges as our best answer choice. Let's have a look at question number 2. The author gives all of the following reasons for why marginalized people are systematically discriminated against in technology related interventions, except. So why are marginalized people systematically discriminated against? So there are some reasons offered. Let's go ahead and dive into it and see. Considering that every answer choice seems to quote a part of the passage, I think we simply need to look at the ones which are connected to the marginalized and their disempowerment. Let's check. So A, we hardly question whether devices are built sustainably, which has led to a crisis of medical waste and healthcare, accounting for 10% of US greenhouse gas emissions. This is about environment. It is not about the marginalized people. So A can be an answer. Look at except. So 3 of these are talking about marginalized people. 1 is not. That's the one that we are concerned about. So A is environment. Let's look at B. Racially based adjustments, racial differences, non-white people as inferior. Very clearly, marginalized people are being systematically discriminated in this case. So let's just rule it out because we are looking for an option where marginalized are not getting discriminated. Okay, then C. Beyond physical failing, subjective beliefs can encode social inequities. So once again, if that happens, marginalized people are going to be discriminated against. So let's rule this out. D, but those technical ideals are at their core social and political choices determined by dominant culture, focused on economic growth for the most privileged segment. So this says that the most privileged benefit. So it favors them. So since it favors them, it favors whom? The most privileged segment. It implies that the ones who are not privileged are being discriminated against. So D is also connected to it. This also gives us an evidence for it. So D can also be ruled out. So our best answer choice for question number 2 is option A. Let me take you through the next one now. All of the following are examples of the negative outcomes of focusing on technical ideals in the medical sphere, except. So 3 of these talk about the negative aspects when you focus on only technology, and 1 is not linked with, or is not giving you, or is not acting as an example of negative outcome. So the one which is not leading to a negative outcome will be our answer. So let's start. A, incorrect assignment of people as female at birth, which has resulted in faulty drug interventions, not mentioned in the passage. The passage says that the wrong dosage has happened. Whether people are incorrectly labeled as female when they should have been labeled a male is not something that the passage deals with. So I do not know whether it is an outcome linked with the pursuit of technical ideals. So this can be our answer. Let's look at B. Exclusion of non-privileged groups in clinical trials which leads to incorrect drug dosage, mentioned with respect to the women. So let's eliminate it. C. So it is a negative outcome. C. Neglect of research and development of medical technologies for the diagnosis and treatment of diseases that typically afflict marginalized community. True, this is a negative outcome which is mentioned with respect to endometriosis. So let's rule it out. D. Continuing calibration of medical devices based on past racial biases that have remained unadjusted for changes. True, this is a negative outcome mentioned with when the author talked about that example of spirometer. So let's rule that out. So A, as a result, emerges as our top answer choice here. Let's have a look at question number 4. We can infer that the author would approve of a more evolved engineering pedagogy that includes all of the following except. So once again, pedagogy is the methods used in a teaching, the activities used in a teaching. So what is it that the author favors in this particular case? What is it that the author favors? The author says that, hey, so far there has been a pursuit of technical ideals, and that pursuit of technical ideals is, according to the author, sub-ideal. It is something that, according to the author, is not something that we should prefer. Right? So what he says is that we should go ahead and create an environment, according to the last 2 paragraphs, where the focus is more on taking care of the social aspects, the political aspects, taking care of those who are marginalized. So let's go ahead and check. So what is it that he would approve of? So A, moving towards technical social dualism. The author says that there is a technical social dualism and the author is against it. He says that you should not think of technology as something which is separate from the society. Society is the basis. You need to identify the problems of the society and then use technology as a tool to fix those problems. You should not think of, hey, technology is separate, society is. So author very clearly is against it. So will he approve of it? No. Then let's see the next part where social community needs are incorporated in problem definition and solutions. Yeah, but then that's not what happens in technical social dualism. In that dualism, you ignore those other things. So the first half is definitely contradictory and therefore the author will not approve of it. So, and we are looking for something that the author would not approve. Notice if I remove this except, it basically becomes would not approve. So the author will not approve of it. So A can be our answer. Let's look at B. Will the author approve of making considerations of environmental sustainability intrinsic to the development of technological solutions? Yes, he will approve of it. He has mentioned that medical waste example. So because he'll approve of it, it can't be our answer. C. He'll approve of design that is based on the needs of communities using local knowledge and responding to local priorities. Absolutely yes, last paragraph, the second half. So even this rules out, it's consistent with the passage. D, author will approve of a more responsible approach to technical design and problem solving than a focus on speed and developing and bringing to scale. Yes, a more responsible approach is where you are engaged in public welfare. So yes, author will approve of it. So even this gets ruled out. So the best answer choice here is A, because the first half is not right. So that helps us wrap up this particular passage, and here is something that I want to leave you with. So you may end up making a lot of mistakes, but do not allow those mistakes to bog you down. Get up, dust it all off, and continue working. So that's it from me today. Don't forget to like the video, and yes, do subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one now. Until then, stay safe, stay focused, stay in touch. See you soon.